Our first panel of the day, the NASA as an Accelerator panel. Our moderator is Bruce Pittman, who is currently the Chief System Engineer in the NASA Space Portal Office. He has worked across many space projects over the course of his career at NASA. His contributions range far and wide across numerous early growth and Fortune 500 companies. Please join me in welcoming Bruce Pittman and our panelists.
Well, thank you, everybody. Hope everybody enjoyed the interlude, that we specially programmed to get you your cardio exercise and going down and coming back up. And you all found your way. I'm so proud of you. This is the 10th year, I think, that I've been involved with this conference, and it's been really amazing watching it kind of grow and mature over the years. And so it's almost like adults, putting this on now. It's just kind of really interesting watching the Space Frontier Foundation evolve and all that. And as an advocate, that makes me happy. I'm really happy to do this panel as well, although it's always tough to follow Mark Sharangelo. I've done this before, and it's always an awkward thing to do because he's such a good speaker. Didn't what he had to say great? I thought he did a great job. Yeah. So, like Mark and some of the other speakers this morning, I've been at this a long time. I think back, my first conference like this that I put on was held in San Francisco in 1979. So that makes me old. And it's been interesting to see how the industry has evolved over those many years. So just a little bit of background. I started off my career as a NASA person, as a civil servant, actually as a co-op student at UC Davis. And then I worked on programs like Pioneer Venus. I worked on the infrared astronomy satellite. I did advanced concepts. I worked on the early phases of the International Space Station. And then I left to go become an entrepreneur. I got bit by the entrepreneurial bug. And so I left the government and went off to make my fame and fortune. And as was said, it's an interesting journey. So I was part of the founding team of Space Hab. I was there in a little cabin up in South Lake Tahoe the day that Kistler Aerospace was born. So I was part of the team there and all the visions that we had. Just as a factoid, Kistler started off as a single-staged orbit vehicle. So you heard that here. Didn't quite work out so well. So again, good learning experience. But particularly with the Space Hab experience, it was interesting to see comparing, the challenges that we had in interacting with NASA, because back then nobody really knew how to work with the private sector, and then how much better things are today. So that's what we're here to talk about. Is some of these kinds of lessons that we've learned over the years, and how government and industry can work together, and particularly with the smaller, younger companies. So on the panel, we have a great selection of folks from both the government side, from industry, both, and I don't use old space, I use traditional space. I've learned this because I also chair the commercial space group for the AIAA, so I have to be very careful. You don't want to alienate anybody. So traditional space and the new space. So we have kind of a mixture here on the panel, because really the traditional space is always reinventing itself. It's always had to, and as was mentioned earlier, there's some change in the wind. One of the things that I've been saying for a number of years now is that we're in the middle of a paradigm shift, a commercial space paradigm shift. And what you're seeing is the reason that it looks so chaotic and kind of confusing is that this is what a paradigm shift looks like from the inside. So, see, this is a great thing you're experiencing. So I'm just going to briefly introduce the panelists and then have them talk a little bit about their background, and then they've got a little bio in the background, so in your program, and I'm pretty sure you can all read, so I'm not going to insult you by trying to do that. So what we've got is, let's see, which order we in. So we've got Daniel Faber here on the end is the CEO of Deep Space Industry. So he wants to mine asteroids and build small satellites. That we have Elizabeth Driscoll from Aerojet Rocketdyne. This is from my old hometown I used to live in Citrus Heights, and so they built the S4B for the Apollo, and I used to hear that firing off when I was a kid. So they're doing some really cool, and she's got a show and tell item here that she's gonna give to you. We have Dennis Stone from the Johnson Space Center, and he's going to give us a little bit of perspective on some of the stuff that they've done. And they really did a lot of the heavy lifting on the COTS program as far as public-private partnerships and that. So Dennis is going to talk about that. Jason Dunn is the CTO of Maidenspace. So he's going to talk to you about additive manufacturing and 3D printing in space and how a small company can go from just a few people and a wild idea to flying space hardware in just a few years. So miracles can happen. And then finally, we have Michele Gates is the program director for the Asteroid redirect mission at NASA headquarters. And so she's going to talk to you about the big picture of what they're trying to do, and then specifically about some of the innovative things that they're trying to do as far as acting as an accelerator of giving an opportunity for private industry to participate in their missions. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask each one of them to give some opening remarks. So we'll kind of go down the line in order here, and then I'm going to start off with some few questions. And although we're running a little bit late, I'm going to try to leave some time for the folks in the audience to ask some questions as well. So we will start off with Daniel.
Thanks very much, Bruce. So Deep Space Industries is a space resources and technology company. Our long-term vision really is to be providing all the materials and equipment needed to build cities in space. This is going to take us a few decades. But to get that material out of the asteroids and make that available in Earth orbit to expand the space economy, we need to be doing a lot of prospecting work at the asteroids. We need to do a lot of advanced assessments of what is in the asteroids, of how easy it is to dig the asteroids, of those kind of things. That needs a lot of technologies that at the moment don't exist for the small, low-cost kind of spacecraft that we need to close our business case. So we started with a lot of technologies that will let us get to the asteroids, and we found that there are customers in Earth orbit for those technologies. For advanced propulsion systems, pointing systems, communication systems, power systems, at a level of reliability and performance to enable people to do new things in Earth orbit. So that's how we bring back to the work that we're doing right now today, to the markets that we see today, the customers we see today, and we tie that all the way through in a bootstrap plan that's very methodical, and frankly, we've tried to make asteroid mining as boring as possible. So as we go through this process, we have our investor money, we have our customer money, and we're building a lot of things on the back of that. We also see the long term and what we need to do to extract material from asteroids to work with that material and provide feedstocks for 3D printers, to provide fuel that can enable large NASA missions out to other parts of the solar system. You have to be able to use that as well. So there's a utilization technology, and then there's the processing and manufacturing technology. These are things that right now we're not spending our key and valuable investor dollars on. They're not things the customers are paying for us. And this is where the government has really been able to help. So NASA has looked at what its goals are and what that timeline is, and NASA's really good at technology development. So we've partnered with a lot of people, we've done some development ourselves, and NASA has been able to help us out like that. So when you have a long-term goal, and some things are not yet on the economic return part of the spectrum, those are things that NASA really can act as an accelerator to help develop.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth.
Hi, so I'm a business development manager at Aerojet Rocketdyne, and I focus on our next generation technologies for in-space both propulsion and power. And what that means is I get to do NewSpace kinds of things with a company that's got a long history of doing exciting and innovative things. My colleague Fred Wilson spoke yesterday a little bit about some of those past things, leaving the solar system, being every planet. But what excites me is the new things that we're doing today and developing today, some of which actually even enable the kinds of NewSpace missions that we are talking about this week. And that's why I did bring a prop. I didn't bring slides, but I brought a prop. So this is one of the many new technologies we're developing. It's a 1U CubeSat propulsion system. It comes with 4 thrusters. It's a chemical propulsion system. It can either run on a conventional hydrogen propellant or our new green propellant technology. It's also one of the many NASA public-private partnerships that Aerojet Rocketdyne is working on, and we have many of those, though. I like this because it's portable, it's small, I can hold it in my hand, put it on the desk. But we also are working on new green propellant technologies for small sats and even for larger applications. We have some next generation bipropellant technology we're working out of our LA offices. That's another collaboration with another NewSpace company associated with NASA's Lunar Catalyst program, which is with a company called Asteroid, and we're partnering with them to do lunar missions, commercial lunar missions. We're also working on the Dream Chaser vehicle that Mark talked about so wonderfully earlier this morning. Our group down in LA is doing the power systems for that. So we're continuing to advance technologies, both on the propulsion side and the power side, to do a lot of really cool and exciting things, both in partnership with NASA and with other commercial partners. For us, commercial is not new, but we've been doing about a third of our business, at least up here in Seattle, has been commercial for many, many years, mostly that traditional geocom market. What's so exciting now is all these new markets that are opening up. A lot of people have new missions with new customers, new revenues that can come into the space business. And the more people that are putting satellites in orbit around the Earth or going to the asteroids or going to the moon, it's the more people that need propulsion. And we can provide that and we can help that, continuing to innovate new technologies.
Dennis. I want to give you a very short user's guide to how to work with NASA as an accelerator, because that's what I've been working on over the last few years. So this is really directed to those of you who have companies and are looking to work with NASA to help you achieve your goals. The ultimate way, of course, is to get a contract. You just heard Mark Sarangelo talk about the Dream Chaser. They have won a cargo transportation contract to carry cargo to the space station. That, of course, is ideal where you have NASA and other customers that can share the same resource. But often companies are not ready quite yet to get to that point. So NASA offers an array of vehicles. We particularly use the Space Act Agreement as a non-contract way of working with industry. And let me just briefly talk about the different kinds. There are 3 kinds. There's basically what distinguishes them is the flow of money. In one case, companies pay NASA. The other case, there's no exchange of funds. And the other case, NASA pays companies. Now, don't get too excited because that's not frequently used. But let me at least mention all 3. Yeah, don't assume that in your business plan, just my advice. Anyway. So the first is called the Reimbursable Space Act Agreement. NASA has a lot of technologies, a lot of facilities, a lot of capabilities that the public has already paid for. And so we very much want to make these available to the commercial sector if they don't interfere with NASA's internal use of those engineers and those facilities and capabilities. So the first, the reimbursable, basically NASA becomes your contractor. You pay us to do some work, to do some testing, and so on. It's a pretty simple, clean transaction. That's called a reimbursable Space Act Agreement. The second kind is where there's no exchange of funds. And this is a case where there is something gained on both sides. Say you're going to launch a small satellite. You need to use our thermal vacuum chambers to test it. But the data that's going to come from your satellite might help one of NASA's programs. And so here's a case where we give the company something, the company gives us something of relatively equal value, and that creates an opportunity for the non-reimbursable Space Act Agreement. I'll give you 2 examples where NASA initiated these. One was the Lunar Catalyst. Astrobotics is one of the winners, Maston and Moon Express. where there's no exchange of funds, but they want a competition to land small payloads on the moon, and NASA's providing technical support. The other is a program I currently am working on, the collaborations for commercial space capabilities. Again, we had a competition for companies that are doing things that might be of interest for us to purchase in the future. So we're helping SpaceX go to Mars in the Red Dragon. We're helping ULA on the Vulcan and ACES development. We're helping Orbital ATK on their mission extension vehicle that can extend the life of geostationary communication satellites, and Final Frontier Design, innovative spacesuit company. So they're all getting technical help because of a competition. That was something initiated by NASA. You can also do these no exchange of funds deals based on your initiative, where you go in to a center and say, I've got a deal for you. I need this, but I'm willing to give you that. And the center will help broker that. The last form is where we pay the companies and provide technical help. Again, this is very rare. I worked on the COTS program. We believe that was the first time that was ever used. We then used it on CCDev, the first commercial crew development activity. Again, it's very, very unusual, a case where NASA needed a commercial capability so much that we offered both technical help and funding. So every center has an office, partnerships office, like the space portal where Dan and Bruce work. Dave Huntsman is Mr. Partnerships at the Glenn Research Center. When you want to learn more about these options, explore the capabilities that NASA has that can help you, and how what you have might be of use to NASA, these are the places to go, and they will help broker a deal for you. But anyway, that's the brief overview of how NASA can help accelerate your commercial space venture.
Great. Jason. All right. So show of hands, how many people have seen the TV show Silicon Valley? All right, very much everybody. Okay, so we're a Silicon Valley company, not totally like those companies in that TV show, but we are in Silicon Valley. It's interesting to be a space company there. And what's more interesting is that, and people are usually surprised when they hear this, Maidenspace has never taken any venture capital. So we're 6 years old, doing pretty well, but never taken venture capital. The reason why is just like a lot of the companies do in the Valley, they usually, when they get started, they go into an accelerator, and the accelerator kind of puts some seed funding in, helps them build up, like customers, contacts, and technology, and so on, and then they go off and raise money. We went in straight to NASA, and we said, we have this 3D printing technology that we think really revolutionizes kind of how we think about exploration, and we'd like to work on that with you. So NASA became our accelerator, and that started in 2010, and we've just been working with NASA the whole time to develop technologies that meet kind of like exploration needs for astronauts and for what NASA needs to do, but also has commercial mindset to it. So everything we do is tied into how do we commercialize this technology? How do we get to the point where we have real products? So do we have my slides? If we can pull those up, I'll show a couple things. If not, I'll just talk over it. So we started with a 3D printer on the space station in 2014. It was a NASA Maidenspace partnership to learn about 3D printing, to understand how to make it work. We demonstrated that it's possible. And then from that, Space went off to build a new 3D printer. It's a commercial facility, so that means that we own it, operate it, maintain it, and we provide the service of manufacturing in space. 3D printed, now there's a very easy mechanism to do that. And over the past few weeks, we turned on the printer for the first time and started to build the first objects that have ever been basically commercially ordered to be manufactured off planet Earth. So actually, I'll show a video of the first thing that we built was with a partnership we had with Lowe's, the home improvement company, who actually they partnered with us on the printer itself. So I'm going to show a quick video of kind of the commercial they put together. say about that? Thanks. So that's a pretty good example of how we move very, very quickly towards commercialization, building commercial products and bringing that technology is now going to benefit 3D printing industry on the ground as much as it does for space exploration. But, and I'll close on this, where we're taking it for us as a space company is really thinking about the future of manufacturing in space. So everything we've done with a printer inside the space station that helps exploration, and astronauts and entities on the ground. For us, it's actually a building block of technology to get us to a point where we can build things that never could have been launched to begin with. So things are just far bigger than could ever fit into a rocket, for instance. And that's a program that we've also started with NASA called Archinaut. So it's like architecture, astronaut, and it's a public-private partnership under the Tipping Points program. And we're developing a spacecraft that once on orbit builds and assembles very large objects. And in this picture, it's assembling a communication aperture far larger than those of deployable apertures. So just maybe we can design things for space and build them there that we could never have launched and really don't fit into rockets. So a satellite in the future may look more like this image here, where and very unlike the satellites that we're used to. So that's kind of where we're headed, and we continually look for ways to commercialize these technologies and having NASA help accelerate that path.
Michele?
Can you hear me? Hi, good almost afternoon. I just want to say this is my second NewSpace meeting, and this is a great meeting. The creative and innovative energy in this community, the diversity of race and gender is so strong and really inspiring to see. So I'm so pleased to be here and be able to share with you a current vision, which I hope you all can see yourselves in, and a role for all of us. So NASA is on a journey to Mars, and there's many steps in this journey and many paths and options in this journey. Folks spoke in detail eloquently yesterday about all of the work going on in low Earth orbit, the interest, commercial interest and commercial services being provided in low Earth orbit, and the activity that Jason just spoke about is one of our most recent successes in partnerships in low Earth orbit towards a future which is very open and full of opportunity. The part that I'm going to focus on is the proving ground, which is kind of the second phase you see in this image. And that is a region of space which offers some gravitational regimes which provide a real advantage for us for testing our next generation of astronaut-based crewed systems for human exploration beyond low Earth orbit. And our goal is really to get to the stage where we're Earth independent, and we talk about Mars as a horizon destination. The several hundred-day trip to and from Mars for crew really requires a level of independence from the services and the ability to return our crews as well as launch logistics and supplies from Earth. And so it's really a continuity of capability as well as learning and experience that we is part of this journey. So the Asteroid redirect mission is intended to be a mission in the mid-2020s in the regime of cislunar space.
Hard to integrate those two pieces, so I'll also say that. But we have a long history on both sides of that, of working with NASA and transitioning into commercial programs. And I gave an example talking with some of the other panelists. Our HiPad engine does orbit raising for a vast number of the commercial geocomms that are flying in the Western world today. That engine traces its pedigree back to the Apollo mission, and it helped land on the moon. And then there was investment, both by our company, internal investment dollars, and our commercial customers over the years to continue to evolve and innovate that to the product it is today. But we were standing on, NASA investments from the very beginning. And I can give you 2 more times than we have of examples since now and then where we had NASA technology, investing in technology, internal investments, commercial customers, and all of that played together. What I see emerging now in the relationship with NASA is 2 things. One being a more formalization of some of those commercial partnerships. So whereas previously they might be organic, we would do some technology development with NASA and then on our own independently do some investment. We're seeing a conscious choice on NASA's part through things like the tipping point to really focus that. And so it's not just, they're not separate but related activities. They're integrated and say funding activities that require cost share. But you're seeing that evolve. But you're also seeing an evolution in the way NASA interacts with NASA business in commercial private sector. You talked about the commercial crew program, and we have the benefit of being on Orion and on the commercial crew programs for several of the primes. And that relationship is different in terms of how much NASA wants to allow the private industry to take ownership and take responsibility versus how much NASA wants to control everything and how you validate. And in both cases, there's an expectation we're going to put people or cargo on top of it. It's got to be right. But what we're seeing is an evolution in how that has to happen. And then I apologize. The second question was
had to do with working with the entrepreneurial companies, the NewSpace companies, and how was that viewed when you first started doing that at Aerojet?
I think in terms of looking at it internally, there's been 2 challenges, but for the most part, we've had huge support. And I mean, you heard Jim speak earlier today about the importance of NewSpace and those relationships. One is a question of some people have been through the teledesics. And so they go, well, are we going to get paid with these startups if they don't succeed? And so having to work through that financial risk aspect. And the other part is balancing the risk postures of our many different customers. And so you have traditional commercial customers, you have NASA human space customers, you've got NASA science missions, and now you've got new and emerging commercial companies. And each one of them has a different attitude towards risk and mission success and their expectations for how they go about that assurance. And so we're a subcontractor and we want to work with everybody. We have to internally balance how do we have processes that are tailorable and scalable so we don't ever let anything slip on those absolutely must work all the time missions. But at the same time, not imposing the cost associated with those must-work things on a mission that says, we're going to put up 100 of them, and if one has an issue, that's okay, we'll put up the next 100, and that'll be fine too. And so we have to figure out ways to tailor our processes across that risk spectrum and cost spectrum.
Good, thank you. Michele, a question for you. As you have shepherded the Asteroid redirect mission through the process that you're going through, on one hand, you could say that the NASA's Accelerator is kind of a benefit that NASA can provide to the commercial sector. But what about the reciprocal side of that, of the benefits that you got? Has that brought and opened up new opportunities for you to maybe do things you couldn't have done, or maybe even save some money or on some of the things that you wanted to do on your mission?
That's well said, Bruce. In fact, on the slide that I showed, the acceleration opportunities to date, the work that was done in 2013 and 2014 through the broad RFI that we received over 400 responses to, and then our BAA solicited concept studies, we actually came up with and validated the option B we talked about, which is the return of the 20-ton glass boulder from a large parent asteroid. Rather than the original concept, which was encapsulation with an inflatable system and redirection of a small asteroid in its native orbit. And we got some criticism over that decision that occurred in December 2014. But it came from the strong studies and views of potential partners, as well as the science community's interest in the target asteroid 2080 V5. And so absolutely, the collaborative formulation way that we've gone about this has significantly changed our mission concept. In addition, we were actually originally planning an in-house build for the spacecraft, and are learning through investigating the applicability of commercial GeoSat class buses to our mission, and also commercial industries' interest in commercial uses of this class of advanced solar electric propulsion led us down this acquisition path that we're on. So we have a very different mission concept than when we started, and that's taken us some criticism as well as some very positive advocacy, but I think it's been very fruitful.
So in any kind of situation like this, there's always some frustrations you find or some things you wish you could change. If each of you could come up with one thing in this whole idea of collaboration or partnership or NASA's an accelerator that you could change to make the process better, what would you want to change? What could make this work even better?
Is that me again? Okay.
Whoever wants to go first.
So in my view, just being within NASA headquarters, it takes 3 years to plan, propose, get through appropriation, and then get into implementation of a budget, which is really a program plan as well. The process is, I would say, more partisan than I've ever seen it, and so just our ability to conceive of collaboratively and then execute on both short-term and long-term partnerships could benefit from some real coalescing of our political system and our stakeholder system.
Anybody else want to
I
tackle
might
that?
echo similar comments because, as I think others have mentioned this week, time to market is huge in terms of getting a product transition and being able to offer it to customers. And as a industry partner who's trying to get a product developed and fielded and into the hands of our customers, and you can oftentimes long delays in acquisitions. There's a program, we had an award announcement that we were selected last fall. We're still not on contract, and the nature of that program is such that it requires us to invest our own money, but anything we do before the program starts doesn't count. So we're even limited in making progress on our own nickel right now because we have to wait until we get the matching funding to start moving forward. And that just delays our product fielding timelines. And so that would be my summer comments, is finding ways to streamline those acquisition processes.
I could add a little bit. So when I put myself in kind of in the NASA shoes and think about how could you do it better, right? Because with all these maybe issues of getting on contract quick enough, it's still pretty amazing everything that they're able to do, right?
Absolutely.
A lot of what we do came out of SBIR program, so that's another one. Especially if you're in the crowd thinking about how to get started, look at SBIR because it's a mechanism that has wonderful data rights to the companies that create technology because it's very specifically geared to the companies to grow your business. So I think one thing that would be, talking about NASA as an accelerator, an interesting idea would be if NASA created a new program that had no proposals, no RFPs, none of that. It was just a pitch day. You just show up at NASA headquarters and half of the panel are NASA people, the other half are VCs, and you pitch, and you have a 10-slide deck, and you pitch your idea, and you walk out that day with a check, if it's good enough. Because the thing is that we have the VCs in the Valley come to us and they say, we could give you money, it will be in your bank account tomorrow. So like when we're in the same boat as Aerojet, where you propose something and then maybe 12 months later you're on contract, that's a distinguishing difference, right? From how easy it is to get the money if you need it, if you're willing to dilute yourself. So NASA has a really interesting spot where it's like what they do is super exciting, what they fund is amazing, and it's non-dilutive. So if there's a way for that money to just go into the bank accounts of companies like next day, that would be a really cool program.
By the way, the first thing we did on COTS was to hire a VC.
Yeah, there you go.
Come in and help us get our mind around the investor mindset.
So on that note, Dennis, you're probably one of the world's experts on Space Act agreements and the ins and outs of that. And I don't mean that as an insult, but and for those of you who don't know the history of this, that I don't know who the brilliant person was, but there's actually Space Act agreements came about because of two words in the Space Act that created NASA, and it says, that NASA is able to do contracts, grants, collaborative agreements, and other transactions. And so that's what the two words, other transactions. So NASA calls that OTA, other transactions authority, and the Space Act is actually what implements that and kind of gives life to it. And it's just those two words. So I guess the question would be, that was 1958 that we came up with this and we started formulating this. If we were going to do it again, what could we do better? What is the next step that could leverage off of the progress that we made, to this point with the Space Act agreements? Is there a next phase that you could foresee that could really help us take it to the next level?
Well, as you point out, it's taken us some time to use the authorities that we already have. And that's okay. Back in the days of going to the moon, I don't think a Space Act agreement was appropriate. I mean, there's no partnership. If your job at NASA is to acquire gravity waves, I don't think there's a big market for that, right? So those have to be government missions where the government owns and operates the system that does the mission. But I think, thanks to COTS and these other initiatives, we've opened the trade space at NASA. And even other agencies, based on the COTS experience, the Air Force used its OTA, its other transaction authority, in its recent rocket propulsion stage, I can't say contract, partnerships that they've awarded to a number of companies.
The XS1?
No, the SMC has awarded to ULA and other companies to develop engines that can replace Russian engines. So that was another transaction authority. So we've got a lot of authority, a lot of capability to do things in different ways. The question goes back really to the NASA program managers. Should I develop a government-owned and operated system because it's very unique, there's no market for this, or should I use a more partnering approach to meet my mission need in such a way that it creates commercial capability? In that case, I would, instead of buying systems, I'd buy services or data. And that allows, just like, when we buy launch services, the provider can sell those services to others. We don't buy the rocket, we buy the service. So I would just like to see more consideration given to that trade space of programmatic strategies in the future.
Cool. So let me ask one final question, then I'll open it up to the audience. So Michele brought up the idea of the government as a customer, and that was also, I think, a key element of the COTS, Commercial Orbital Transportation Services, was that commercial resupply services contract behind it was also a key element in this. So this idea of the government as a customer and as specifically as an anchor customer, where you're kind of out there front, whether it's for propellants in orbit or electric propulsion systems or something like that. I don't know if we can source xenon off planet, but that'd be kind of cool if you could do it. So what do you see as the role, both from the commercial side and the government side, the risk, rewards, and benefits of of the government, taking on that role of a customer, and particularly as an anchor customer, and to help, birth these new industries.
Yeah, I think
is that all credible? I mean,
yeah, I think that can be very important. A lot of people will know the analogy of the airline industry and how the Postal Service decided that they would put out contracts for delivery of airmail, and that helped to give a financial incentive to get regular flights going, and that was a big difference. I think what we've seen in the space industry, definitely the COTS program has provided a way for companies to get to the point where they can address the government's needs as a customer, and the government is still a large customer for launch and is hoping to bring those companies really to fruition with their plans. If we think about NASA as an accelerator, the goal of an accelerator is to graduate the companies onto other things, and so providing a source of early revenue, putting companies in touch with customers in network is something that's typical of an accelerator program in a commercial setting. Putting customers, suppliers, and new companies in touch with NASA customers similarly helps. But the goal is to graduate. I think the goal of a lot of what we're seeing here and definitely a lot of the NewSpace companies is to serve commercial customers. And the biggest challenge to really expanding the commercial ecosystem in space and the economic activity is the cost of getting things to orbit. So big improvement with the COTS program, trying to get commercial companies that are innovative and looking to drive down the cost of launch, and that can help. There's a lot of activity happening, and a lot of VC money is flowing now into miniaturization of spacecraft and improving the capabilities of spacecraft so that you don't have to launch as much mass. That helps. The next revolution we see, and of course the reason deep space industry is in business, is that if you can use the resources that are up there already, then you don't have to take the materials up there with rockets, which are inherently going to be expensive for a long time to come. And so with the combination of these three things happening, we're going to see a massive expansion in the in-space economy. This is the paradigm shift that you mentioned at the start, and I think that everybody really wants to see this point where the NASA budgets, the government budgets, become a minuscule part of what is a huge commercial economy. That's the future that we look forward to. The question is, how far away is that, and how quickly can we get there, and can NASA accelerate that? And so these kinds of programs can really provide an acceleration. An anchor customer can provide you something to move off, but you need to be looking beyond that to what is the customer, what is the application, how do we encourage people to look for business models that are beyond the government? That to me really is the key.
And I guess I think it's important to have a healthy mix of that. I mean, any business that's tied to one single anchor customer is then at the mercy of that single anchor customer. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that you're going to be all government or all commercial is going to be really challenging, because all of those are going to have their pluses and their minuses. And I know we have some products for which the commercial business is the anchor tenant, and we sell a handful to NASA for specific one-off science missions or exploration missions. But then there's other products that have a really specialized capability that you don't need that extra bit for commercial. And all of those markets ebb and flow. And so you want to balance so that as one is up and one is down, and then hopefully that trend is globally up. And you see a lot of growth in some potential new markets in commercial. But you got to have that balance.
I kind of think about this a lot because, today, just by the state of this industry, NASA is in many ways an anchor customer because NASA is doing so much of the activity that we do in space, right? And so obviously you go to, they have needs and the industry can meet the needs. But for both, I think both for NASA and for industry and for entrepreneurs and everybody from big to small, as thought leaders, it's our job to be thinking about what we want the future to be and decide that that's the future for space that we should be creating. Today space is one thing. It's mostly about sending bits up and down into space, right? And anything else besides that is pretty much how do we send people to Mars or deep space. But we should really be thinking about the full picture, the full future of what what space can be. And when we do that, then we start to realize that, like Daniel's saying, there's commercial capabilities that come online. There's obviously NASA is still doing what NASA has always been doing in terms of exploring and pushing the boundary. But as soon as we do that, we start to think about these new things. For us at Maidenspace, it's a lot about moving beyond just bits up and down and going to atoms and making things in space. And to help people live in space, right? Today, I would say before we even talk about settling Mars, why aren't we talking about settling low Earth orbit? Today, low Earth orbit is it's a camping trip. That's how we live in space. Thanks. And to me, that's what happens first. We as an industry, we learn how to settle low Earth orbit. And we'll look a lot like, I say, cruise ships and oil rigs. It's hotels and it's like grungy manufacturing in space, and cruise ships and oil rigs, and that will be how we live in space, and that will drive economy there, it will drive industry there, and it will drive a necessity for people to be there. And as soon as that happens, then we see more launches happen, new technologies come online to allow people to live in space longer so it's sustainable, and then all of a sudden getting to Mars is not a problem anymore.
Great. So I know we're standing between you guys and lunch, but let's take a couple of questions from the audience. Why don't we do here, and then we'll go over here.
Great. Jason, I really liked your idea about the sort of dragon's den of the space industry, having people pitch their ideas in 10 slides. So yeah, I think you're looking at a room full of wily coyotes right now, and a lot of us would like to dream of having a moment in front of some good decision makers with checkbooks and being able to pitch our ideas and see not only just the opportunity to pitch our ideas, but the opportunity to see how other people have pitched their ideas and what worked and what didn't work, so that we can go in more prepared. So today, if somebody were to try to connect with NASA and pitch an idea, what would the process be like? Like, can you explain what somebody typically goes through, what works, what doesn't work, in the sense of the whole pitch, and what will potentially lead to some sort of a relationship with NASA? Can you give us an idea or a sense of that?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. So I'll tell a quick story of something that worked for us. It's 2010. We're starting Maidenspace. We have these big visions of like what I just described, and we're saying, well, where do we start? And obviously, like, we're thinking about 3D printing and how that could be really useful on the space station. So we say, well, of course NASA must be working on this. So we go do the research, and NASA wasn't working on it in 2010, but when we went into doing research, we found, hey, NASA actually was working on that in the 90s. There was a group in Huntsville that flew a Stratasys, early version of a Stratasys printer on a parabolic flight, got some good data, and then wrote journal articles and said, this technology has promise. It said this should go on the space station. When that was written, the space station was the Zvezda module connected to Unity, so it's like two things. That was our space station. So they were ahead of their time, and we called them up. It was Ken Cooper at Marshall Space Flight Center, and we called Ken up. And we said, "Hey, tell us about this work." And he said, "Well, we love that idea, and we just it's kind of on the shelf." And we said, "Well, we're thinking about doing that as a company," and that began a conversation. We went out and visited them, they came and visited us, and we talked about how do we do this together? How do we make that vision that we have as a company and NASA had a long time ago actually happen? And then it just became a long process of looking at all the different ways to do it. And the challenge is that for NASA to fund anything, it has to be competed, right? That's just a kind of the law. So we went through the process of writing proposals that anybody else in the States could have written towards, and then and through that process, we were selected to design printers to fly them in zero gravity and all those things, and that allowed NASA to then come in, and in the end, Ken Cooper was the principal investigator on the NASA side of the first printer that went to space. So for him and his team, he got to do the thing that he had outlined in the 90s. So I think the point is finding champions within NASA, finding the people in the organization who believe in exactly what you believe in, and then working together to make it happen.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, we've got time for one more question.
So this is also from Mr. Dunn, and I was wondering
Spread to somebody else.
It's okay.
how complicated structures do you think you can autonomously build in space, and do you think it's like applicable for space-powered satellites at all?
That's a good question. So if any of you saw the talk by Jonathan Knowles yesterday from Autodesk, that helps describe it a little bit. But what we're looking at is the design of things that can only exist in space. So maybe they're too fragile to survive under gravity, or definitely unlaunchable. They can't survive the loads of launch, and they are way bigger than fairing. So what we do is we're looking at how we can use optimized and generative design to come up with those structures. So we give constraints. We say, we need to connect two satellites together by a large baseline that has to have this strength to mass ratio, or this stiffness characteristic. And then we let algorithms design that. The interesting thing is what usually comes out are things that can only be 3D printed. They're just very complex geometries, have a lot of hierarchy built into them. And so complexity is interesting when it comes to 3D printing, because in some ways it's free, right? You can have as much complexity as you want. So I think solar power satellites are a really neat idea, because it's one of those things that we don't have them today because it's an example of a very large thing that would have to exist in space. So for us, we're interested in big things in space, and maybe that's one of those things.
Cool, thank you.
So please help me thank the panel. So we're going to lunch?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're now headed upstairs to the lunch